Y'all, stop scrolling. Right now. Because what 50 Cent did to Rick Ross in the last 48 hours is not trolling, it's not promo, and it's not another chapter of a 20-year joke. This is a public execution of an entire image, carried out with a ghost, a mansion, and a rental listing. And by the end of this breakdown, you're going to see exactly why everybody behind the scenes is saying Rick Ross didn't just lose a round. He may have lost the whole legacy war and doesn't even know it yet. See, every blog on your timeline is running the wrong headline tonight. One outlet is screaming about Tupac. Another one is screaming about Eminem. The gossip pages are stuck on the mansion, and not one of them, not a single one, is laying the pieces side by side in the order they actually happened. Because when you do that, when you stack the receipts the way I'm about to stack them, this stops looking like a rap beef and starts looking like a demolition with a blueprint. And 50 Cent is holding the blueprint, and Rick Ross keeps handing him the keys. But before we get into the nuclear part, and we are getting there, so don't you dare click off, let me set the table for anybody who's been out the loop, because this round didn't start with a diss track. It started with a number. Now, Rick Ross just dropped the album he had been teasing for months. The rollout was everywhere. The interviews, the billboards, the listening sessions, the cigars, the linen suits, the full Rosie experience. The feature list read like a festival lineup, 20-plus guests, some of the biggest names in the game. Rick Ross himself told anybody with a camera that this project was going to be the statement of his late career run, the one that reminded everybody why they call him the biggest boss. And then the first week figure hit the timeline, and the number floating around, somewhere in the neighborhood of 22,000 units, landed like a casket lid. And listen, it didn't take an hour. Fifth was on it before the blogs could even finish their think pieces. The memes started that same night. The reaction channels ate for a week. Rosie was trending worldwide, and not for one single bar on the album, for the number under the album. That detail matters more than anything I'm going to tell you tonight, so hold on to it. The music became a footnote to the math. And once the math becomes the story, the man attached to the math becomes a punchline. That's the machine Rick Ross walked into, and he walked into it smiling. And let's be honest about what first week culture even is in 2026, because Fifth understands it better than almost anybody breathing. The number is not a measurement. The number is a headline generator. Nobody at the cookout is quoting the Metacritic score, they're quoting the units, because the units fit in a caption. He built half his second career on understanding that a number with a joke attached travels further than any album cut ever could. So when that 22,000 figure started circulating, it didn't matter whether it was precise, whether it counted bundles, whether it told the whole story. It was meme-shaped. And he has spent 20 years proving that in this culture, meme-shaped beats true every single time. Now here's where Rosie made the chess move that his fans loved. Instead of swinging back at the sales talk, instead of dropping a response record, Rosie went quiet confidence mode. Interview after interview, that slow Miami drawl, talking about the long game, talking about longevity, talking about bots and fake streams, and how the real flex, his words, his energy, is keeping the music pure while everybody else buys their numbers. His whole posture was, I'm playing chess, Curtis is playing checkers. And I'll tell you what I'll give credit for, as a frame, it worked. For about a week. Ross fans ran with it, quoted it, posted it like scripture. On paper, that's composure. That's a veteran refusing to bleed in the water. That's a man who looked at a humiliating first week and decided the scoreboard was rigged. So he simply stopped acknowledging the scoreboard. Except, and this is the part y'all need to sit with, composure means nothing to a man like 50 Cent, because Fifth doesn't fight your argument. He fights your image. And the second Ross floated above the numbers conversation, Fifth went digging through every luxury flex Ross ever posted and started pulling threads. The chicken wings, the car show, the feature list that couldn't save the first week. One post at a time, one caption at a time, every single one with that signature grin behind it. The grin that tells you Fifth is not angry. Fifth is entertained, and somehow that's 10 times worse. An angry enemy you can fight. An entertained enemy just keeps finding you funny, and there's no clapback for being somebody's comedy material. And here's a detail in the sequence that almost nobody caught. So rewind with me for a second. Watch the order Fifth chose. He didn't lead with the mansion. He led with the small stuff. The wings, the car show, the features. That's deliberate. You start with the jokes that are too petty to respond to, because responding to a chicken wing joke makes a boss look small. So the target stays quiet, and the silence reads as tolerance, which buys the joker a license to go one size bigger, then another size. By the time the mansion post lands, the audience has been preconditioned through a week of smaller laughs, and the big accusation slides into the timeline wearing the costume of comedy instead of the costume of attack. That's not trolling. That's escalation engineering, and it's the exact same ladder Fifth has climbed in every feud he's ever won. And then, when everybody thought the trolling had peaked, the mansion entered the chat. Now, if you've been following Rick Ross for any amount of time, you know the estate. The $100 million estate. The tours, the drone shots, the palm trees, the pool, the car shows on the lawn. That property isn't a house in the Rick Ross universe. It's the headquarters of the entire Biggest Boss mythology. It is the visual proof of every lyric he ever rapped. When Rosie says he's rich beyond measure, he doesn't point at a bank statement. He points at that lawn. Think about what that property actually does for the Rick Ross business model. The estate is not shelter. The estate is a content set, a credibility prop, and a negotiation tool all at once. Every brand partnership, every booking conversation, every business sit-down Rick Ross has ever walked into was pre-framed by footage of that driveway. When a man sells you a lifestyle, the lifestyle is the collateral. And that is exactly why he aimed there. You don't burn down the whole house to hurt a man like Rosie. You just put a little sign in the yard that says, "For rent," and let the neighbors do the rest. So imagine the timeline's face when Fifth logged on and told his millions of followers that the crown jewel of Rosie's empire was, allegedly, up on Airbnb. Available for booking. Like a vacation spot. Like a venue you can rent for the weekend with a decent credit card. Run that back in your head one time. He didn't say the music was fake. He didn't say the streams were fake. He pointed at the single most load-bearing piece of the Rick Ross brand, the house, and said, in essence, everything is fake. And y'all, the internet turned into a crime scene investigation within the hour. Screenshots everywhere. Threads everywhere. People tagging realtors, pulling listings, cross-referencing palm trees. Some swore the listing was real. Some swore it was a different property entirely. And here's the sinister genius of it. It did not matter which side was right. It still doesn't. Because Fifth was never trying to win a court case. He was planting a question mark over a man whose entire career is built on certainty. And once that question mark is hanging there, every future Rick Ross flex posts with a footnote attached. Every mansion photo from now until the end of time has a comment section full of key exchange jokes waiting under it. That's the part the blogs missed while they were busy fact-checking the listing. The truth of the claim was never the weapon. The doubt was the weapon. Doubt is the only ammunition that never runs out. Now, to be fair, and I always keep it fair, Rosie did not just absorb that shot. Rosie fired back, and on paper the clapback had weight. He told the young hustlers watching that if he wanted $250,000 first week, he could have played the buying game. 400,000, same thing. His exact implication being that those numbers are for purchase, cheap, and always have been. And then he said the part that really had his fans standing up. The artist's Fifth champions couldn't show you a palm tree in their front yard, while he, Rick Ross, was standing on a $100 million estate. And real talk, against anybody else, in any other era, that's the quote of the week. That's the headline the next morning. That's the clip every page reposts with the fire emoji. But this is 50 Cent. And 50 Cent doesn't answer shots. 50 Cent changes rooms. Because while the culture was still chewing on the mansion exchange, while people were still mid-debate about whether a man can rent his own legend back to himself, Fifth strolled into a totally unrelated interview and, with the casual energy of a man reading a grocery list, announced that he has a brand new record locked in for the upcoming Street Fighter movie soundtrack. And this record doesn't just feature 50 Cent. It features Eminem. And it features Tupac. Yes, that Tupac. The Tupac gone nearly 30 years. The most protected voice in the history of American music. And when the interviewer visibly short-circuited and asked if this was one of those AI voice situations, 50 Cent shut that down on the spot. No artificial intelligence. No tricks. He said the Tupac estate approved the record, delivered previously unreleased vocals, and signed off on the whole thing. He said the paperwork was real, the vocals were real, and the record was built specifically as the theme for the Street Fighter film. And if you watch his face in that clip, watch it closely, he knew exactly what he was detonating the second the words left his mouth. That was not a man sharing news. That was a man laying a trap in front of the entire industry and smiling while he covered it with leaves. Y'all hear me? 50 Cent, Eminem, Tupac. One record. A movie franchise behind it. If that song lands even half the way it's being teased, we are not talking about a chart entry. We are talking about a generational event. Radio runs it. Playlists front page it. Every fight scene edit on every app gets scored to it. Kids who never heard a Pac verse in their life will hear one and think it's brand new. That isn't marketing. That's mythology. And let's talk about the Eminem piece of this for a second, because it got swallowed by the Tupac headline, and it shouldn't have. Eminem does not hand out verses. Eminem disappears for years, guards his features like state secrets, and shows up only when the moment is engineered to matter. The last time 50 Cent and Eminem stood on the same record with real stakes, it was an event. So the second this track was announced, every hip-hop head over 30 heard 50 and M on a movie theme and immediately time-traveled back to an era when that combination ran the entire industry. That's nostalgia as a weapon, and 50 Cent loaded it into the same clip as a posthumous Tupac verse. That's not a rollout. That's a heist. And the estate angle deserves its own moment too, because people who don't follow this world closely might not understand how rare that green light is. Unreleased Tupac material has been guarded with a ferocity that is frankly unmatched in music. Whole documentaries, whole albums, whole biopics have come and gone with the estate saying no more often than yes. So if 50 Cent is telling the truth, if the family truly cleared original, unheard vocals for a Street Fighter theme, then what we're looking at is arguably the most shocking licensing decision of the decade. Either that, or Fifth just floated the most audacious bluff of his career in front of millions, knowing the estate would have to respond. And here's the terrifying part. Both versions benefit him. If it's real, he owns the year. If it's a bluff, he owns the news cycle while everybody argues about it. That is what playing chess actually looks like. And one more thing about that announcement that flew completely under the radar. The first question out of the interviewer's mouth wasn't about the movie. It wasn't about Eminem. It was about AI. That tells you exactly where the culture's head is right now. The assumption in 2026 is that any legendary voice on a new record is a deep fake until proven otherwise. And Fifth, being Fifth, had the answer loaded before the question finished. No artificial intelligence. Estate approved. Previously unreleased. Paperwork real. He didn't get caught by that question. He was waiting on it. Which means he understood, before he ever sat in that chair, that the difference between this record being a celebration and this record being a scandal was one sentence of clarification. And he delivered that sentence looking straight into the camera like a man who has never flinched at a lens in his life. Which brings us back to Rick Ross, because Rosie had 100 doors to walk through when that announcement hit. He could have said nothing. He could have saluted it. He could have let the moment breathe and recalculated in silence. Instead, Rick Ross picked up his phone and swung at the one thing you do not swing at. He mocked the whole collaboration, told the timeline that Curtis is about to drop music with Eminem and Tupac, and then said, and y'all know the quote by now, that Pac's been gone 30 years, let the man rest. He took a shot at Eminem in the same breath, told 50 Cent to put the G-Unit sneakers out, watch them flop, and go run a Tony Yayo and Lloyd Banks remix. Smirked through the whole clip in that signature laid-back Miami tone. And if you freeze that video and study his face, Rosie believed he'd just ended the round. You can see it. That's the face of a man who thinks he just landed the knockout. But look at what the swing actually hit. He didn't critique the music. There's no music out to critique. He didn't challenge the paperwork, the estate, the movie, or the rollout. He swung at the very concept of a legend's voice appearing on a new record. And that punch lands on nobody. It doesn't land on 50 Cent, because the estate made that call too. It doesn't land on the culture, because the culture is pressing play on release day, whether Rosary blesses it or not. And here's where it gets genuinely dangerous for the biggest boss. The Shakur estate has spent 3 decades as the most selective guardian of unreleased material in this industry. If they cleared this record, that isn't a paperwork detail. That's a coronation. And Rosary, trying to embarrass Fifth, accidentally positioned himself against the estate's own decision. That is not a shot at Fifth. That is a shot at the most protected legacy infrastructure in hip-hop, taken casually, on camera, with a laugh track. Veterans don't take that swing. There's a reason. And how did 50 Cent respond to all of it? He didn't. Not one word in defense of the record, not one word about Pac. He simply picked the mansion weapon back up and swung it again, posting, in essence, look at this man hosting open houses on a $100 million property that's allegedly listed like a weekend rental. Everything is fake. The culture ran the detective threads all over again. And that's the choreography, y'all. That's the dance Fifth has been perfecting since before some of y'all had accounts. Ross swings at whatever just hit him. Fifth is already standing in the next room, holding the next weapon. Now, here's the layer almost nobody covered, and it might be the heaviest one. In the middle of all the jokes, Fifth slid in a completely different kind of accusation. Fifth called out Rick Ross for, in Fifth's framing, letting a black woman take the fall for him. The claim, as 50 Cent told it, was that when Ross lost certain show opportunities, he let the blame slide onto the woman who created and ran those shows. The same woman who, per Fifth, handed him thousands of episodes worth of platform. And the punch itself was devastating in its simplicity. Be loyal to the black woman the way you're loyal to Eminem. Y'all, that's not a punchline. That's not chicken wings and rental jokes. That's a character charge dressed in playground language. And it's the kind of charge that follows a man into every interview for the next 5 years. And to this moment, Ross has not answered it. Not on his page. Not on his stories. Not in a single sit-down. Long game, longevity, bots, every answer except that one. And whether it's fair or not, in this economy, an unanswered character charge reads like a signature on a confession. And notice the architecture of that particular accusation, because it's different from everything else in this feud. The mansion jokes are about money. The sales jokes are about numbers. Those are flesh wounds. They heal. They fade. They become old memes. But a loyalty charge is about character, and character charges don't fade. They attach. Every future interview Rick Ross does, there's now a question waiting in the notebook. Do you stand by the women who built platforms for you? Every future time he posts about loyalty, and loyalty is half the rosy vocabulary, somebody in the comments is going to type that 50 Cent line right back at him. That's the difference between a joke and a brand. 50 Cent didn't just insult Rick Ross. He installed a permanent pop-up ad inside the Rick Ross story, and it opens every time Ross tries to talk about honor. And sit with the construction of that specific line one more time, because it's the coldest sentence in this whole war. Fifth didn't say Ross was disloyal. He said be loyal to her the way you're loyal to Eminem. And it does 3 things in 8 words. It accuses Ross of betrayal. It frames his relationship with Eminem as servitude. And it wraps the whole accusation in the language of advice. So it reads like concern from a distance and like a blade up close. That's not a post. That's a legal document written in playground ink. And notice, Rick Ross can never quote tweet it, never repost it, never even reference it, because repeating it just teaches it to more people. The only winning move against a line like that is answering the substance. And answering the substance means having the conversation he clearly doesn't want to have. So it sits there, unanswered, compounding interest. Meanwhile, the sneakers subplot kept running in the background. Rosie saying the G-Unit sneakers are Costco-bound, claiming he prefers the Lloyd Banks pair, implying half the crew has no real deal at all. And it was a clever little shot, layered, very Miami. But zoom out and look at the battlefield he picked. Ross chose to poke Fifth on business. The arena where Curtis Jackson's resume reads like a business school case study. The water deal, the spirits brands, the television empire, the film production, the promotion ventures. Love him or can't stand him, the receipts are the receipts. Picking the entrepreneurship fight against 50 Cent is challenging a shark to a lap race in the shark's own pool. And notice the pattern in every exchange. Ross jabs at sneakers, Fifth counters at the mansion. Ross jabs at features, Fifth counters with a rental listing. Ross performs a monologue about longevity. 50 Cent announces Tupac and Eminem on a movie soundtrack. Every single trade, 50 Cent trades up. Every round, the stage gets bigger. That is not luck. That is a man who has studied exactly what stops a thumb mid-scroll for 20 straight years. And if you think this choreography is new, you haven't been paying attention, because the archive tells the same story in a dozen different fonts. Go back to the beginning. The origin of this whole war was 50 Cent deciding, like a man choosing a target off a menu, that the Rick Ross persona had a crack in it. Back when the correction officer reveal was still fresh and the culture was still arguing about what authenticity even meant in rap. Fifth didn't invent that crack. He just refused to let it heal. Every year or two since, right on schedule, 50 Cent has walked back to that same crack with a fresh crowbar. The lawsuits, the baby mother interviews, the boxing challenge that Rick Ross laughed off and 50 Cent monetized anyway. The streaming war era, when Fifth turned every Rosie release week into a running gag on his own page. 20 years, same drill. Ross builds a flex. 50 Cent studies the flex. 50 Cent finds the crack in the flex. 50 Cent posts the crack. Ross responds emotionally, and the emotional response becomes the raw material for the next post. The cycle has outlived record labels, streaming platforms, entire social networks. It's the longest-running show in hip-hop, and only one of the two men seems to know he's producing it. For the new fans who just got here, understand how deep this file goes. This didn't start on Instagram. This started when Curtis Jackson looked at the rise of Rick Ross and made a business decision dressed as a grudge. The early rounds were diss records and radio interviews. Then came the era of courtrooms and child support jokes, and Fifth literally showing up to places connected to Ross's family. Then the culture moved to blogs, and the beef moved to blogs. Then the culture moved to Twitter, and the beef moved to Twitter. Then Instagram, then TikTok clips, then podcast circuits. Every time the audience changed rooms, Fifth changed rooms first and was already sitting there when Rosie walked in. That's the part that should genuinely be studied in marketing programs. Most artists' feuds die because the platform dies. This one survived 4 platform migrations because one of the two participants treats the feud as infrastructure. To 50 Cent, Rick Ross is not a rival. Rick Ross is a venue, a stage that fills itself every time Fifth announces a show there. And Rosie keeps paying the rent on it with his reactions. Now, since everybody loves to play strategist from the couch, let's actually play it. What are Rick Ross's real options from here? Option 1, total silence. Starve the cycle. Let Fifth swing at air. The problem? Fifth has feuded with silence before and simply narrated the silence instead, and an unanswered rental claim hanging over a luxury brand is its own slow leak. Option 2, go musical. Drop the best record of his late career and let the art talk. The problem? After a 22,000 first week, the next number gets graded twice as harshly, and Fifth will be sitting courtside with a caption ready either way. Option 3, the nuclear hug. Laugh along, repost the joke himself, flips self-deprecation into charm. That's the one move he has historically struggled to counter, because you cannot humiliate a man who humiliates himself first with a bigger smile. But it requires something Rosie has never shown in this feud, the willingness to let go of the boss posture, even for one post. And the boss posture is the brand. So he can't, which means the trap has no exit that doesn't cost him a piece of the mythology. That's not a beef anymore. That's a checkmate pattern. And one more layer on the Mansion saga that deserves its own spotlight, because it explains why this particular accusation hit harder than anything else in 20 years of this feud. Rick Ross is not just a rapper with a nice house. He turned that property into a revenue stream and a content empire at the same time. The car shows on the lawn, the film shoots, the brand placements, the tours for the cameras. The estate works for him every single day. So when the rental claims started circulating, it didn't just question his wealth, it questioned the business model. If the headquarters is a set, then every production filmed on it gets retroactively reread as theater. That's why he answered that claim faster and harder than he answered anything else in this entire saga. Watch the tape of this feud and clock the response times. The sales jokes took days to answer, the loyalty charge is still unanswered, but the mansion? He was on camera about the mansion almost immediately. A man tells you where he's vulnerable by what he defends fastest. Now, one more thing, and I'm going to be responsible with it. This part is chatter, not confirmed reporting. There are whispers that the Street Fighter record could get a public preview at a major event in the coming weeks. If, big if, that's true, then the timing of the Pac comment couldn't be worse for Rick Ross. Because the second the culture hears a real Pac verse next to a real Eminem verse next to Fifth over a cinematic beat, the Mansion debate evaporates, the sales debate evaporates. The whole long game sermon evaporates. And Ross is left standing as the one man who told everybody not to celebrate the moment they ended up loving. There is no lonelier seed in hip-hop than betting against the moment. And there is no stain harder to wash out than a screenshot of you laughing at the record the whole world ended up singing. Now, let me be fair one more time, because there's a real argument buried in what Rosary said. Plenty of people sincerely believe some legends should be left to rest, that even with estate approval, a video game movie soundtrack isn't the right home for unheard Tupac vocals. That's a defensible, respectable position, and I want to give it the weight it deserves. But the strongest version of that argument doesn't arrive with a smirk and a Curtis punchline attached, delivered by a man who's been at war with 50 Cent for 15+ years. The second the moral point climbs into a beef vehicle, the moral weight burns off. And that, more than any meme, is the story of how Rosie keeps losing these rounds. The points aren't always bad. The delivery keeps detonating them. A valid argument carried in a broken vehicle still arrives broken. And this is the part where the whole board becomes visible, so stay right here. Go back through his entire public playbook, 2 decades of it, and one pattern repeats like a drum loop. Whenever Fifth is entering a new business era, a new show, a new deal, a new project, a new soundtrack, a beef mysteriously heats up, never a random target. Always somebody with the name recognition to trend, the pride to respond, and the audience overlap to multiply the attention. Rosie checks every box. He has always checked every box. That's why, of every possible name on the board, Rosie is the one he never stops poking, not because he can't let it go, but because it works. Every single time, it works. And look at the timing on your screen right now. A movie tie-in, a soundtrack announcement, estate cosigns, a franchise on the horizon, and an endless ticker of memes, mansion jokes, and rental captions keeping his name in every single conversation for free. Whether Rick Ross realizes it or not, every reply he posts is free advertising for a project he already criticized in public. That's the trap. That's the whole trap. Every time you swing at 50 Cent in 2026, you're also holding up his poster. And the fan split on all of this is exactly what you'd expect, which is to say it's chaos. Half the timeline is crowning Fifth the undisputed heavyweight of psychological warfare, clipping every exchange, grading every caption like Ring's judges. The other half is asking, loudly, when trolling stops being entertainment and starts being obsession, because 20 years is a long time to hold anything, let alone a grudge with a posting schedule. The Rosie loyalists are pointing at the car show attendance, the Wingstop franchises. The real money, they say, doesn't need a first week number to be real. The Fifth faithful are pointing at the mansion listing screenshots and asking how a boss rents out the throne room. And both sides are generating exactly the thing 50 Cent ordered: volume, noise, heat. The algorithm doesn't care which side you're on. It only cares that you picked one. And look at the secondary economy spinning off this thing, because it's massive. Every hip-hop podcast with a microphone booked this story this week. Every reaction channel cut 3 videos off 1 caption. Blog traffic, clip pages, debate threads, morning show segments. An entire content food chain feeding on 2 men's Instagram accounts. Fifth knows this. He's not just feuding with Ross. He's feeding an ecosystem that then turns around and advertises everything with his name on it for free. The podcasters think they're covering the story. They are the distribution network. There's a difference, and the difference is the whole ballgame. So zoom all the way out with me. This was never really about 2 rappers and some captions. This is about what veteran success even looks like in the streaming era. Does longevity look like Rick Ross? Catalog, lifestyle, image, the long game, refusing to chase first-week numbers? Or does it look like 50 Cent, pivoting into television, film, soundtracks, spirits, boxing, whatever medium keeps his name welded into the algorithm? Both models have believers. Both have receipts. And what we're watching right now, in real time, is those 2 philosophies at war wearing the 2 loudest personalities the genre ever produced. That's why this beef refuses to die. It isn't about Curtis, and it isn't about Rosie. It's about which blueprint the next generation of artists is going to inherit. Whoever wins the narrative wins the next 10 years. And don't think the young artists aren't taking notes, because they are. Every 22-year-old with a buzz right now is watching this feud like a masterclass with two competing professors. Professor Ross says, build a world so lush that numbers become optional. Sell the dream until the dream is the product. Professor Fifth says, own every room, every screen, every conversation, and never let a week pass where somebody isn't saying your name. 10 years from now, when the class of 2036 explains why they move the way they move, some of them are going to describe the Rosary model, and some of them are going to describe the 50-cent model. And the ratio between those two answers is the actual scoreboard of this beef. Not first-week units, not meme counts, the blueprint vote. And right now, tonight, with a ghost verse, a movie franchise, and a rental listing all working at the same time, one professor is giving the lecture and the other one is stuck responding to the homework. And here's the piece that should keep every artist watching this up at night. In the attention economy, Fifth understands something his opponent either can't or won't accept. Being talked about beats being right. Trending beats correct. Unforgettable beats universally liked. He does not care if half the internet calls him petty, because all of the internet is watching. And every time Rick Ross replies, every story, every video, every smirk, he strolls willingly into a trap 50 Cent set before Ross even picked up his phone. Fifth isn't swinging for the knockout. Fifth is swinging for control of the lens. And whoever controls the lens decides what the whole culture sees, what trends, and what gets remembered. Now let me put my prediction on the record so y'all can hold me to it. Within the next 2 weeks, one of three things happens. Either a snippet of that Street Fighter record surfaces and the entire conversation resets around Fifth's terms. Or Rick Ross drops something, a record, a rant, a business announcement, engineered to reclaim the frame, and Fifth peels it apart in a single caption within the hour. Or the quiet option. Somebody's people call somebody's people, and this goes private for a while, which honestly would be the smartest move Rosary has left. Because every day this stays public, the math gets worse for him. The mansion jokes compound. The pack comment ages. The loyalty charge sits unanswered. And Fifth just keeps converting all of it into oxygen for a soundtrack rollout. Screenshot this segment. When one of those three doors opens, I want y'all back here telling me which one it was. So now it's your turn, because this part belongs to y'all. Should Rick Ross have stayed silent on the Tupac record? Has 50 Cent finally taken the trolling too far? Or is this exactly what he's always done? Is the mansion really a rental? Or is Fifth bluffing for engagement? Does that pack verse actually see daylight? And if the preview drops, and it's a classic, can the biggest boss brand survive being on the wrong side of it? And the biggest one, does this end with a truce? Or does it end the way every 50 Cent feud ends, with one man posting memes years later while the other politely refuses to say his name in interviews? Sound off in the comments. I'm reading every single one, and half of my next breakdown starts in your replies. And if you want the full story the second the next shot gets fired, hit subscribe, tap that bell, and lock your notifications in, because when this next chapter drops, and it will drop, you can hear it from a random page with half the facts, or you can hear it right here with every receipt, every screenshot, every angle. One last receipt before I go. Rosie spent 2 decades selling a fantasy, the estates, the jets, the Wingstop empire, the palms, an entire widescreen fantasy the culture printed out and hung on its wall as proof that this music can build empires. Fifth isn't attacking one piece of that board tonight. He's questioning the board itself. And the cycle never changes. Ross builds a flex, Fifth studies it, finds the crack, posts the crack, and Ross's response loads the next weapon. And before anybody asks me whose side I'm on, I report the tea. I don't wear the jersey. What I will say is this. 20 years from now, when somebody writes the definitive book on hip-hop's internet era, there will be a full chapter on this rivalry. And it won't be in the music section. It'll be in the media strategy section, right between the invention of the hashtag and whatever comes after the algorithm. Because whatever you think of either man, this feud stopped being about two rappers a long time ago. It became a live demonstration of how attention actually works now, who manufactures it, who reacts to it, and who gets rich off the difference. That's the tea for tonight. But keep your cup out, because this pot is still boiling. Don't blink over the next 48 hours, because if even one preview clip of that Street Fighter record leaks, this whole war changes overnight. Chapter whatever. Season finale nowhere in sight. I'll talk to y'all later.